I've always been a logical person, numbers over emotions, facts over feelings. I built my life around spreadsheets, business deals, and the belief that if you worked hard enough you could solve almost any problem but cancer. Cancer doesn't care about logic. When my mother was diagnosed, it was already too late. Stage 4. Pancreatic. They gave her 3 months, at best. I remember sitting in the hospital room, the sterile white walls closing in on me, her body so much smaller than I remembered. The woman who once carried our entire family on her shoulders could barely lift her hand to brush the hair from my face. She smiled anyway. She always did. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Oh, don't cry." But I wasn't crying. I couldn't cry. Something inside me had shut off. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was years of teaching myself that vulnerability was weakness. I don't know. All I remember is the crushing weight in my chest, like my ribcage was too small to hold everything I was feeling. The days that followed were a blur of medications, hospice consultations, and a never-ending stream of visitors who brought flowers, casseroles, and hollow words. I handled everything, paid the bills, managed the appointments, fielded questions from distant relatives. It was my way of coping, I guess. If I kept moving, maybe I wouldn't have to face the reality of what was coming. Then, one night, after everyone had gone home, Mom asked to talk. She was in her favorite chair by the window, bundled in her soft blue blanket, the one she'd had since I was a kid. I sat across from her, expecting her to ask about her next appointment, or if I could bring her more of those lemon cookies she loved. But instead, she reached for my hand, her fingers cold but still somehow comforting. "Daniel," she said, "I have one last wish." I blinked. "Anything, Mom." She smiled gently. "So I want to see you married before I go." I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me she was joking. But she wasn't. "I want to know you won't be alone," she said. "You've spent so much of your life working, building things, but never living. You need someone, sweetheart, and I need to know someone will love you when I'm gone." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I didn't need marriage, that I didn't have time, that love wasn't something you could just manifest on command. But I looked into her eyes, and I saw it. The quiet desperation. The unspoken fear that she'd leave this world without seeing her only son build the life she always dreamed for him. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I was 31 years old, successful by most standards. A thriving investment firm, a sleek penthouse, a calendar so full I had to schedule time to breathe. But in all that time I'd never let anyone in. I'd dated casually, sure, but nothing serious. Nothing permanent, nothing she could see and smile about on her deathbed. So I did something stupid. Or maybe noble. I still don't know. I decided to give her what she wanted. But how do you find someone to marry when your hearts never belong to anyone? I couldn't fake a fiancé. I couldn't pay someone to pretend. It had to be someone who could at least convince my mother she meant something to me. And that's when I thought of her, Maria. She'd been working for our family as a housekeeper for almost 5 years. Quiet, respectful, kind. She'd taken care of my mother through the worst of her illness, never asking for anything in return. She wasn't just staff. She was the closest thing to family we had outside of blood. She was also beautiful, in a quiet kind of way. Not flashy or attention-seeking, just warm. I remember the first time I mentioned the idea to her. She was folding laundry in the guest room when I walked in, nervous, palms sweating like I was some awkward teenager asking a girl to prom. "Maria," I said, "can I talk to you about something unusual?" She looked up, startled but attentive. "Well, of course, sir." I hated when she called me that. I explained the situation, stumbling over my words, trying to make it sound less insane than it was. She listened quietly, her face unreadable. When I finally finished, there was a long pause. Then she asked softly, "And what would happen after?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It would just be for my mother. A ceremony, a few weeks maybe, just until—" I couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't answer right away. But the next day, she brought me tea and said only 2 words. "I'll do it." And that was it. Within a week, we were standing in my mother's garden, saying vows neither of us meant, at least, not at the time. My mother cried through the entire thing, smiling like she'd just been given 1 more year to live. She didn't get a year, but in those few weeks before she passed, I saw her happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. She'd look at Maria and me, like we were her greatest masterpiece. I thought I was doing something good, something beautiful, something selfless. But what I didn't know was that Maria had secrets of her own, and the moment my mother closed her eyes for the last time, Those secrets began to surface, one by one, until the truth left me questioning everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the woman I had called my wife. If I'm being honest, I didn't know much about Maria, not really. She'd worked in our house for over 5 years, but I couldn't tell you what her favorite color was, or what she did on weekends, or if she had family of her own. She kept to herself, never overstepping, never asking for more than she was given, just there, like part of the wallpaper, present, essential but quiet. My mother adored her. They'd bonded in those final years, long after Dad emotionally checked out and I buried myself in work. I'd come home late, still, in a suit, and find them in the kitchen. Maria gently brushing Mom's hair or reading to her from an old poetry book. They had a rhythm, soft, steady, sacred. She was patient in a way I never learned to be. She listened, not just with her ears, but with her whole presence. When Mom cried, Maria didn't try to fix it. She just sat there, held her hand, and let her feel it. That kind of grace, I envied it. So when the idea of marrying someone to fulfill Mom's last wish first entered my mind, I pushed it away like a bad joke. But then, I saw Maria again, this time sitting quietly by my mother's bedside, humming a lullaby I hadn't heard since I was a child, and something inside me said her, it has to be her. It still felt wrong though, like I was using her. But desperation does strange things to people, and I was desperate. When I proposed the idea, if you could even call it a proposal, I half expected her to laugh or walk out or slap me, but she didn't. She just stood there, her eyes searching mine, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the laundry she'd been folding. "For your mother?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said. "Only for her. I swear, Maria." Just until I couldn't say the word. She nodded slowly, as if weighing something heavy in her heart. And then, she said, "Okay." That was it. No discussion about terms, no conditions, no mention of money. Just, okay. Looking back, I should have questioned that. I should have asked why she agreed so easily. But I was too wrapped up in my own grief and guilt to notice. We had the ceremony. In the garden. Mom's favorite place in the world. The air was thick with the scent of roses and lavender. The nurse wheeled her out in a blanket-wrapped bundle, tears already forming in her eyes. She clutched Maria's hand the entire time, whispering, "Oh, you're family now." Maria wore a simple, white dress, nothing fancy, just elegant. She looked peaceful, not happy necessarily, but at peace. I, on the other hand, was a wreck in a tailored suit. I remember standing beside her, looking into her eyes as we exchanged the most awkward vows imaginable. She barely looked at me. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. It was something else, like sorrow or restraint. Afterward, Mom made us dance in the living room. No music, just the sound of her laughter as she clapped along to a beat that didn't exist. She died 2 weeks later. Those days in between, though, they were the calmest I'd seen her in years. She called us and her angels. She told everyone who visited how proud she was that her son had finally found love. I played along. Maria. She did more than that. She was gentle with my mother in a way I hadn't been capable of. She sat with her at night when I was too exhausted to function. She kissed her forehead before bed, whispered prayers in Spanish I didn't understand. I started to see her differently. It was subtle at first, the way she'd hum softly as she cooked, or the way her fingers moved when she arranged flowers for the house. There was grace in her stillness, depth in her silences. But something else lingered too, a distance, a secret. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at the family photos in the hallway, not just glancing, staring, fixated. One day, I watched her trace her finger along the edge of a picture of my father, like she was trying to remember something. Or forget it. And then there was that conversation. I came home early from a meeting and heard voices in the study. My father and Maria. The door was slightly ajar. I heard her say, "I didn't want this, you know." His voice, low and cold, "But you agreed to it. We both made our choices." Silence. Then he stepped out, startled to see me standing there. "We were just talking," he said flatly, brushing past me. Maria didn't meet my eyes when I walked in. She quietly excused herself and left the room. I didn't press her. I should have. But some part of me didn't want to know. Not yet. My father. He never approved of the marriage. He said little, but his eyes said everything. He barely looked at Maria. And when he did, it was with a complicated blend of disdain and something that almost resembled guilt. It didn't make sense. None of it did. But I pushed it all down. Because for once in my life I'd done something good. I gave my mother peace. I gave her what she wanted. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that the woman I married was carrying a story much deeper, much darker than anything I could have imagined, and soon, that story would unravel everything. It happened quietly, without fanfare, just as it had been for weeks. My mother passed away peacefully, her frail hand resting between ours. Maria's fingers curled gently around hers, as if she was holding on to the last thread of something precious. I wasn't sure if it was for her own sake or for Mom's, but I didn't question it. I just sat there, numb, staring at my mother's face as her chest stopped rising and falling, her breath slowing to nothing. The hospice nurse confirmed it with a soft, compassionate whisper, "She's gone." I should have felt something more, relief, grief, something. But I was empty. I couldn't think past the immediate aftermath. I didn't have time for it. I'd been living in a world of rituals for so long, doctor visits, medications, pain management, that now, when all of that was over, I didn't know what to do with myself. Or with Maria. The funeral was a blur. We buried her in the family plot, just like Mom always said she wanted. I made all the decisions as usual, and Maria quietly helped where she could, never asking for anything in return. In the following weeks I found myself going through the motions of life, but something had shifted. The routine of the fake marriage, the charade we had been playing, became less of a facade and more of a strange new normal. At night, when the house was quiet, it was Maria's presence that anchored me. I noticed how her laughter, though rare, was like music. How her eyes, when she thought no one was looking, would soften in a way that made me ache with a longing I couldn't explain. I started to see her, really see her. She wasn't just my mother's caretaker anymore, she was something more. Her warmth, her loyalty, the way she could make a house feel like a home, it wasn't just about doing her job anymore. There was an intimacy there. And somehow, over the weeks, that intimacy began to grow. One evening, when we were sitting in the living room reading side by side in silence, I looked up and met her eyes. The air felt different, heavier, like something was pulling us together without either of us trying. She put her book down, her fingers lightly brushing against mine as she stood up to stretch. "Thank you," I whispered. Not just for her help, but for everything she'd done, for the way she'd loved my mother when I couldn't. She smiled. That soft, quiet smile that had always made my heart race for reasons I couldn't articulate. "You don't need to thank me, Daniel," she said, her voice low and almost hesitant. I did. It because I care. Care. That word hit me harder than it should have. She turned to leave the room, but before I knew what was happening, I was standing, moving toward her, and then, without thinking, I kissed her. It wasn't a grand gesture or some dramatic moment. It was quiet, simple, and hesitant, but when our lips met, something inside me shifted. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the grief, or maybe it was something more, a realization I didn't want to face. But when our lips parted, I saw the same uncertainty in her eyes. We didn't speak for a long time. I wasn't sure what it meant, what it should mean, but when I kissed her, I felt something stir inside of me. It wasn't just attraction. It was a sense of belonging, of connection, of having found something I wasn't even looking for. It was the realization that I had, somewhere along the way, accidentally married my soulmate. But the feeling didn't last long. A few days later, everything changed. I came home late from a meeting one evening, my mind racing with thoughts of work, but when I entered the foyer, I noticed something off. There was a strange heaviness in the air. Maria was sitting on the couch, her shoulders shaking, her back hunched over. She was crying. At first I froze, unsure of what to do. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know what had happened, why she was crying. And then, I saw it, the letter. It was clutched tightly in her hands, the edges crinkled from being gripped so hard. I walked toward her slowly, hesitantly. "Maria," I said, my voice gentle, "what's wrong?" She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear, as though I'd caught her in something she didn't want me to see. In a quick, almost panicked motion, she tucked the letter into her lap as if hiding it from me. "It's nothing," she said, wiping her eyes. "It's just personal." I didn't believe her. The weight of the situation, the way she'd been so careful to hide the letter, the look of sheer anguish in her eyes, all of it made my heart race. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But before I could press her for more, she stood up, her body rigid with tension. "I just need some time, Daniel," she said, her voice strained, the words almost robotic. "Please, just let me be." I wanted to demand she tell me what was going on, but I didn't. I just stood there, watching her, helpless. That night, sleep didn't come. I tossed and turned, the image of Maria's tear-streaked face haunting me. What was she hiding? And why couldn't she trust me enough to tell me? The next morning, I went for a run to clear my mind. When I returned, something else caught my attention. From the study window I could hear my father's voice, low, urgent. I paused, not intending to eavesdrop, but the words that followed made my blood run cold. "I owe her the truth," he said, his voice thick with regret. "And should've told her. Years ago." I froze. Who was he talking about? The only person I could think of was Maria. The truth? What? Truth? I had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. My father knew something. And he wasn't talking to me about it. I waited until he left the house. Then I confronted Maria. She didn't deny it. She didn't even speak at first. Her eyes avoided mine, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Maria," I said, my voice shaking with anger and confusion. "What's going on? What is my father hiding?" Her silence hung between us like a storm cloud. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't want to know, Daniel." Those words, they hit me harder than any betrayal ever could. The house felt quieter now. The absence of my mother was like a weight in every room, every hallway. But it wasn't just her absence that haunted me. It was Maria, the woman who had once been my mother's comfort and had, in my eyes, become a partner of sorts, if only by necessity. She was the constant presence in my life for so long that I couldn't imagine it without her. But after that night, when I overheard my father talking about owing her the truth, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't sit around and wait for her to decide when and if she was going to tell me what was really happening. Started digging. I wasn't sure what I was looking for at first, but the feeling in my gut told me that if I didn't act, I'd lose everything. I spent hours going through family records, old letters and photos. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but there had to be something. There had to be some clue that would explain Maria's strange behavior. The way she would vanish for hours. The cryptic conversations she'd had with my father. I felt like I was chasing shadows, but I couldn't stop. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself standing in front of my father's study, the place where he kept all his important documents. His desk was massive, and I'd never dared to touch anything in it before. But tonight, I needed answers. I didn't know the combination to his safe, but I knew he kept a few important things there. So I took a chance and tried. My fingers shook as I dialed the numbers, each click echoing in my ears like a countdown. The safe clicked open. Inside there was an envelope, thick and heavy. I pulled it out carefully and opened it. What I found inside made my breath catch in my throat. It was my father's will. But not just any will. This was a recent version, signed just a few months ago after my mother's diagnosis, and tucked in the middle of the document, as if it were nothing more than an afterthought, was Maria's name. My hands trembled. As I read the details, Maria was listed as a beneficiary, and not just for a small portion like I would have expected. No, she was entitled to a large portion of the estate, almost as much as I was. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it, my mind spinning with questions. Why? How? What the hell was going on? I didn't even think. I grabbed the will and stormed out of the study, rushing straight to the living room where Maria was sitting, reading a book. Her quiet presence in the corner was the last place I ever expected to find the answers I was looking for. "Maria," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to talk." She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. But I saw the instant flash of panic in her eyes. Threw the will down onto the coffee table between us. "Why? Why are you in my father's will? What is all this?" I demanded. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She took a breath, and I could see her struggle. But it was too late to back away now. I wasn't going to let her keep me in the dark anymore. She stood up, backing away from the table, her hands trembling as she wiped her eyes. I was ready for a fight, but what happened next hit me like a freight train. She dropped her shoulders in defeat, her face crumpling as if she couldn't hold it together any longer. And I tried to tell you, she whispered, her voice breaking. But I didn't want to ruin what we had. I never wanted to hurt you. My stomach twisted in knots as she collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. This wasn't what I had expected. I thought I was ready to hear the truth, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure I could handle it. "Maria," I said, my voice quieter now, unsure of what to feel. "What's going on? Why are you in his will? Why didn't you tell me?" She took a deep breath, slowly wiping away her tears. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with a mixture of regret and something I couldn't quite place. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "I wasn't just hired as your mother's housekeeper, Daniel. I was something else to your father before that." My heart stopped. The words hung in the air like a bad omen. "You were? What?" I stammered. Her voice was steady, though it shook with emotion. Was his lover. For years before I ever worked here. He promised me everything. He promised me he would leave your mother for me. But, in the end, he didn't. He couldn't. He never would. So I left. I walked away because I couldn't live with the lie anymore. The words hit me like a punch in the chest. I tried to process it, but it was impossible to wrap my mind around the idea of my father, the man I'd always respected, idolized, having an affair with Maria, the woman I'd married. Why come back? Why take the job as a housekeeper? I asked, my voice strained. She lowered her gaze, her fingers twisting in her lap. Because I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't go back to my life. And when your father called me, when he asked me to come back, it felt like a second chance. He made it sound like we could have a future together, like we could try again. But that was a lie. He was just playing a game. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't say anything. This was too much. Maria continued, her voice shaking with emotion. I thought marrying you was fate, Daniel. I thought it was my second chance to finally belong. I never wanted anything else. I never wanted to hurt you, but I had to keep it a secret. For your sake, and for mine. My mind reeled. I sat there, frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. My father, my mother's betrayal, and Maria, the woman I thought I knew, but I didn't know her at all. I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I thought I understood what secrets could do to a family. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the truth I uncovered. After Maria's confession, the world felt like it had stopped spinning. She was my father's lover. She had been hiding this from me for years, living in the house, pretending to be just a housekeeper, and I had married her in a desperate attempt to fulfill my mother's dying wish. It was a sickening, twisted lie I had walked into, but there was more, so much more. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. My mind raced, unable to settle, constantly replaying everything I had learned. My father's secret, Maria's role in my life, the strange distance she had kept from me, her odd silences when she'd look at old photos of my family. It all started to make a terrible kind of sense. But I needed more. I needed to know everything. I couldn't let this be the end of it. So I dug deeper. I started looking through old family archives, photos, letters, birth records. I searched for anything, any hint, any shred of evidence that could explain what had really happened. I knew I was searching for answers I might not want to hear, but there was no turning back. If I was going to face this, I needed the truth. It was in a dusty old drawer in the back of my father's study that I found it. It was a single letter, folded and sealed with a wax stamp. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, my father's. With shaking hands, I opened it, reading the words that would forever change everything I knew about my life. Dear Daniel, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means I have passed and you have learned of the secrets I kept from you. I can only imagine what you're feeling now, the confusion, the hurt, the anger. You deserve the truth, and so I'm writing this final confession to explain everything. The letter went on to describe things I couldn't fathom, things that twisted my gut into knots. I had an affair with Maria long before you were born. She was not just a housekeeper. She was never just a housekeeper. Maria was your mother. I had kept it from you for years because I was ashamed of what I had done, ashamed of the life I led. I knew I could never leave your mother, not truly, and I couldn't let anyone know about Maria. But when she returned to work for us, when she took the job as your mother's caretaker, I thought there might be a way to fix things. I thought I might still be able to make things right. The words blurred in front of my eyes as I read on. My father was admitting it. He had been Maria's lover, but more than that. He had fathered me with her and kept the truth from everyone. I had spent my entire life thinking I knew who I was, who my family was, but I was wrong, so horribly wrong. There was always a part of me that hoped Maria would come back to me, the letter continued, but I knew she wouldn't. She left because of the life I couldn't give her, and I never expected her to return. When she did, I thought I could keep it a secret. I thought I could keep it from you. I never intended for you to find out this way, but I knew you'd have to, eventually. It hit me like a punch to the gut. The woman I had married. She wasn't just my wife. She wasn't just the mother of my supposed wife's child. Maria had been my mother all along. The woman I had been desperately trying to protect, the woman I had thought I was saving, was my mother. My world shattered. I collapsed into the chair next to me, holding my head in my hands, my body trembling with the weight of the truth. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My whole life had been a lie, and it was all crumbling before me. I had unknowingly married my biological mother. I had tried to protect her from my father's cold, distant love, thinking I was fulfilling my mother's dying wish. But it wasn't my mother I was trying to save. It was my own flesh and blood, The woman who had raised me but who had never been truly mine. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't bear to look at the letter anymore, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I knew I needed to confront Maria again, but what could I say? What could she say? She'd been living this nightmare for years. Found her in the living room, sitting in the same place she had been the night I first confronted her. But now everything had changed. There were no more secrets between us. I walked toward her, my legs weak, my body heavy with the weight of the world. Maria, my voice cracked as I spoke. Is it true? She looked up at me, her eyes red, her face pale. She knew what I had found. She had known this moment would come. I never wanted you to find out like this, Daniel, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never wanted to hurt you. She stood up, her body trembling as she approached me. I wanted to say something, to demand answers, but there was nothing left to say. I didn't know for certain, she continued, her voice shaking. I had my suspicions, but I never had proof. I thought maybe, just maybe, fate was giving me a second chance when you asked me to marry you. I thought this might be my moment to be close to you, to have a family. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to face it, but I did, and now I've lost you. The tears streamed down her face, and I couldn't stop my own from falling. We stood there, trapped in this impossible truth, neither of us knowing how to move forward. I didn't know how much time had passed before I found the strength to speak again, but when I did, the words came out in a low, broken whisper. Oh, you never wanted anything else, Maria? I asked, the pain evident in my voice. You never wanted a real life with me? She looked at me, her face full of sorrow. No, Daniel, I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to belong. I thought that's what this was. I thought we could finally have what we never had before. But it's too late. You'll never look at me the same way again. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how much I wanted to fix it, no matter how much I wished I could rewind everything and erase this pain, I couldn't. The truth was out, and no matter how much I loved Maria, I had no idea who she really was anymore. My heart shattered for a second time. I didn't know what I expected when I woke up the next day. Maybe I thought things would feel different. Maybe I thought that after all the secrets, after all the lies, the truth would somehow bring me peace. But nothing felt peaceful. Nothing felt real anymore. I stood in the middle of the house that had once felt like home, the walls closing in around me, the laughter of my mother, the quiet hum of life. All of it had been swallowed up by a darkness I couldn't escape. The house was no longer just a place, it was a reminder of everything that had been taken from me. My family, my identity, my past. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't look at the house the same way. And I couldn't live with the memories of what had happened. The inheritance, the estate, it all seemed so irrelevant now. I didn't want any of it. Not the money, not the house. All I wanted was to forget. So, I left. I left everything. Behind, the house, the wealth, the life I had known. I didn't even pack a bag. I just walked away. I thought if I kept moving, if I kept running, maybe the truth wouldn't follow me. Maybe I could escape the mess I had inherited. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. When I returned a few days later to gather my things, Maria was gone. Just gone. There was no sign of her, no explanation, no goodbye. Just a single letter. My heart clenched as I held it in my hands, the paper feeling heavier than it should. I unfolded it slowly, already knowing what it would say. I'm sorry. I only ever wanted to protect you. That was all, those words. And they were enough to tear me apart all over again. I wanted to scream at her, to demand an explanation for everything she had done. But what was there left to say? The truth had already come out. There were no more answers. Maria had disappeared, leaving me with nothing but the wreckage of my life, and I was left with the most unbearable truth of all, that everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, my love for her, had been built on a foundation of lies. I couldn't stay angry at her. I couldn't even hate her. I wanted to, but I couldn't. How could I? She had always been the one who took care of me, who showed me love in the quietest, most subtle ways. The same woman who had betrayed me was the same woman who had held my hand as a child, the woman who comforted me when I was broken. She wasn't just my mother's caretaker, she was mine too. And yet, she had never been mine to begin with. I reflected on everything I'd done, everything I thought I had done for the right reasons. I had wanted to give my mother peace in her final days. I wanted to fulfill her last wish. I thought I was doing something noble, but in the end I had only uncovered a life built on secrets, lies, and betrayals. I never wanted to find out this way. I never wanted to know the truth, but I did. And now, I had to live with the consequences. The pain was unbearable at times. But I learned something. I learned that forgiveness doesn't come easy. It doesn't. come with the promise of healing or closure. Sometimes, forgiveness is just the ability to let go of the anger, the hurt, and the bitterness. Sometimes, it's about accepting the past for what it is, and finding a way to move forward. But even now I'm not sure if I'll ever fully forgive Maria, or my father, or myself. Maybe that's the hardest part. The uncertainty. The endless ache of knowing I will never have the answers I need. I don't know where Maria went. I don't know if she's still out there, somewhere, haunted by the same secrets. But I do know one thing. The people who save you aren't always the ones you expect. Sometimes the people who save you are the ones who were hiding the truth all along, and that's what hurts the most. The people we trust the most, the ones who we think will never betray us, are often the ones hiding the deepest secrets. It's a hard lesson to learn. Now, I can't help but ask myself, and you too I suppose, the same question that's been eating at me since the day I uncovered the truth. What would you do if the person you fell in love with turned out to be someone you were never supposed to love? Could you forgive? Or would you walk away forever?